live from US in Progress at the American Film Festival in Poland. I'm speaking to filmmaker Sarah Friedland for Familiar Touch. As we're better at understanding science, cinema's catching up, and I feel like Dementia, like Gaspar Noé, and then there's Michael Franco's film, we're catching up with this, but your film actually does it correctly. Like, there's a deep dive, and I think that comes from the fact that you participated on some level, you understand this world. So my first question to you is, what kind of direction instructions are you giving your lead actress? Because there's so many different beats, there's so many different profiles about this disease. So yeah, just like how much information do you have at hand, and how are you sort of like sharing and exploring that world, and letting the actress also get a feel of what that is?
So, I mean, to start off with, a big piece of this was talking to Kathy, our lead actor, who's brilliant, and talking about getting away from an idea of a decline narrative. I think normally when we look at aging, when we look at memory loss, it's always this sort of loss of self. And so the word that we kept coming back to is continuity, and looking for the continuity of this character, even as there are losses and shifts and transformations, but which pieces of her persist. And in that, I think also looking at age identity. I think we tend to think, in particular with older women, that they're fixed at this place of being an old woman, and we have this grandma image of them. But that actually, I think most of us have much more slippery age identities, that even if you don't have dementia, even if you're not 80, you can access the child version of yourself, the 20-year-old version, etc. And so one of the joys that we had on set was, Kathy and I talked about Ruth, which is our main character, kind of moving in and out of these age identities. But the trust that we had between us was that I did not need to know as a director where she was at. And so she would really play with sort of slipping in between these different versions of herself. And in the script, in some scenes, it's very clear, okay, there's a sort of child self that I'm accessing, or a 20-year-old woman self. And then in other places, it's much more ambiguous. And so that was, I think, one of the most exciting things for me on set, was watching Kathy surprise me and access these different versions of Ruth, and letting that come through. So I think that's a piece of sort of dementia that we don't think about. We think about it usually just as loss, but there's time travel to dementia, that people with memory loss, they can truly experience earlier moments in their life that come back. And so we do that not through flashbacks, but through letting the kind of past versions of our main character come into her present self. And seeing those kind of, that temporal conflict in a way. So that was a big piece of it. And I think the other thing that was a conversation between Kathy and I, but maybe more so with my other department heads, is that misconception with dementia and aging in general is that even if there is a loss or decline in like rational cognitive thinking, that the other ways that we make sense of the world persist, and in some cases are intensified. There's so many ways that people make sense of the world around them, and so we really wanted the film, in its sort of formal components, the sound, the production design, the cinematography, etc., to kind of appeal to these other forms of sense making. So in the sound design, having the production design have like really tactile details, the cinematography being just very attuned to her body and kind of the gestural language, and sort of looking at sense making as something that isn't just rational and cognitive. Not just for people, older adults with dementia, but for all of us. There's a much broader kind of way that I think we make sense of ourselves, and trying to find a cinematic language for that was the conversations that we were having.
What I liked best in the 20 or 25 minutes that I saw of your film was how each advanced piece of narrative portions informs us of sequences that happen maybe 2 or 3 gestures just beforehand. And I really like that approach. I like it. It helps us unravel how different POVs are going about the situation. I thought it was such a great creative choice, but also exploratory choice. And so at the writing phase, how are you how are you thinking about this project in terms of sort of like chaptering out elements or physical elements or emotional elements, and then having reverberate with things that we might have had seen in the past? Like, the idea of memory is fun for a film like this because we're thinking of sequences that are that just occurred, but that then have a different magnitude.
Yeah, I mean, on a writing level, like I'm coming from a background also as a choreographer, and my shorts have all been movement-based dance films that aren't very dancey. They're looking at kind of the choreography of everyday life. And so as much as this had a script that is a traditional screenplay format, I really think about script writing as a type of movement notation. And so the earliest drafts of the script had very little dialogue, and were really kind of tracking Ruth's gestures, moments of touch with other people, activities, sort of daily routine. And so I think the earliest structure of the script was all in physicality, and then as the relationships between her and the other characters deepened in the writing and the dialogue emerged, it kind of all came out of what was already sequenced physically. And I think for me, I tend to think about writing choreographically. And so I think like I had those sequences of moments of touch and gesture before everything else. So I think that's kind of where those rhythms
There's one shot it carries so much weight, and there's so much emptiness and isolation. I don't want to give anything away, but it's in a car, and I just love that sequence, that shot. But I'm so anchored into what's going to happen in this character's immediate life. There's also another gesture that I like, is she's from an old school, like when it comes time to unpacking, there's things that she's holding on to that it's like, hey, she still has, there's an appropriateness to gestures, even though she's lost some of those faculties, if you will. Not in your research, but how did you learn to pick up on cues like that of having a person still safeguard certain elements about their life or their personality, and knowing how to embed that in such a way? I think it's just a powerful sequence. Without giving too much away, it's when she's putting away a certain piece of clothing.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it came from my personal experiences. I was a part-time caregiver to artists with dementia for 3.5 years. And so much of that job, because the type of caregiving I was doing was mainly social emotional caregiving, so not bathing, not doing a sort of more skilled medical care.
Yeah.
And when you're a caregiver, you're really a shapeshifter emotionally. You have to figure out what social role the person needs affirmed. And so some days I was more like a best friend, some days more like an assistant. And that's something you don't see in the first 25 minutes, but it's a bigger part of the rest of the film, is the kind of emotional labor of caregivers.
And I want to say the first caregiver, a nurse caregiver, you get a sense that she has a tool set, and she's very willing to adapt to the situation on the flip of a dime. Yeah, it's exactly that adaptability. And I think when I did this work, and now I teach filmmaking to older adults, it's like you have to take this person-centered approach and understand what is meaningful to each person, and where they identify their agency, and what they locate their own dignity in. Yes.
And it's different for each person. With one person that I worked with, it was like very much about what picking out her own clothing and choosing what she put on her body to go out into the world. For another, it was cooking and the details of what went on her grocery list. And so I think it's figuring out, there's a kind of like emotional detective work when you're a caregiver of figuring out how does someone express their own autonomy? Because I think that, and this is a big part of the film, as you saw, as much as we wanted to stay away from it being a narrative of decline, there is this loss of autonomy that happens that is so difficult. And I was very curious about it also from a feminist perspective, that this generation of older women, they were coming into adulthood during this feminist revolution and finding independence and autonomy, and what is it like for this generation of women then to experience a certain loss of autonomy as older adults, and what does that look like? So yeah, it's all to say, it's like I saw that, I saw these different expressions of individual autonomy of older women who are going through cognitive impairment and aging, and then trying to kind of like learn to read those cues and then to write them.
I could see this character belonging to a Mary Tyler Moore world.
Totally.
She was on the front lines of that.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's also an elegance about this character as well, and she's holding on to a certain, I don't know, not social status, but she's got certain formalities, and like I quite enjoyed that. So you come here at I mean, this is like, it's still very raw and fresh, and now you're getting your first feedbacks. This is probably one of your first interviews for this film.
It is the first.
The first,
well,
there you
go. The Filmmaker magazine.
Yes, that's a pretty cool
2.
profile. I quite like that profile. So like you're still in a vulnerable state, but the finish line is within sight. So how are you processing the last miles? Like what does this look like for you palpably?
Yeah. I don't know if it's been processed yet, because I took a red eye here and landed and went right into that screening.
Oh, wow.
And I'm going right back to the edit room. So I think there has yet to be the pause or space to do any type of processing. I will say though that this was our first, I mean, it was only 25 minutes, but it's our first audience, and seeing that it, like, just seeing that it resonates for anybody is really good, because you don't know.
Of course.
And just getting reactions is thrilling. So that doesn't answer your question, because I don't think I yet have processed any of it.
You're around the corner. You're getting close.
It's close. We're a few weeks away from picture locking, I think. It's been a long, like, I started writing it a decade ago, so it's been a long time coming. So it's the lack of processing, as I'd say, where I'm at.
It was a pleasure seeing you again. It's been at least 7-8 years ago we first met, but it's nice to see you profiled, and for you to find a space here. It's really encouraging to see all the different narrative works, and how I love the idea of the coming of age, but the coming of something else, and I'm very much looking forward to seeing the final product. So
thanks, Sarah.
Congratulations on the little bits and pieces that I did get to see.
It's great to see you, and thanks for the thoughtful interview.
Thank you. Hey, this is Eric from IONCINEMA.com. If you want to support us, subscribe below. For more reviews, interviews, film festival coverage from Sundance, Cannes, Toronto, you want to check out these guys on this side.